Yeah, I'm Mike Woldridge. I'm the architect and lead developer of FastTrack, and I'm going to give a technical overview of the product. I'm going to show you how to set up a three-tier application um, with FastTrack and start using the widgets to build a MarkLogic search application. So let me share my screen. Okay, so let's take an overview, bird's eye view of FastTrack and where it fits into your three-tier search application. FastTrack is a library of React components. So it lives inside your UI layer of your application, your presentation layer. You're going to install it from a TGZ file with npm, and that's going to bring in a number of React components. We also call them widgets that then you can use to build your application. These widgets include, say, a search box for accepting, user query information. Results display widgets that will take the results coming back from MarkLogic and then display it in different ways. We have a number of widgets for building out faceted search, and you can use those to summarize your documents in different ways and allow users to constrain their searches based on different properties in their documents. And there's many more widgets, and some of them you'll see in a moment as I start building out our app. The other core component of FastTrack is this MarkLogic context widget. And that widget sits between the presentation widgets that I just talked about and the back end, which includes MarkLogic. So all the HTTP calls that are sent from the UI to the back end are handled by MarkLogic context. So the presentation widgets aren't talking to MarkLogic directly. They're really talking through, a single place MarkLogic context. And so in our example, we'll have a middle tier server. So that's the middle tier of our three-tier app. And it's going to be brokering all the HTTP calls between the UI and MarkLogic. And of course, MarkLogic is our data layer, and it's serving up all the documents that we're going to visualize in our React application. All right, a couple other things to set the stage for this example. We've loaded some documents into MarkLogic, and we're using just the standard default databases that get installed when you set up MarkLogic initially. We have a documents database, and we've put 3 documents in there, 3 JSON files. And each one of those files represents a person. Let's take a look at one right now. And it's a relatively small JSON file, but it's rich in that it has a lot of different types of data here. And we're going to be able to leverage those different types of data, in our widgets in a moment. We have latitude and longitude information, which allows us to put that document information on a geospatial map if we want with FastTrack. We have relationship information here. In triple form, we have subjects, predicates, and objects. We can take that information and use it in a network graph. And then we have some free form, textual content that'll help us, do a variety of searches and see that everything's working. The other thing we have loaded is in our modules database, another one of the default databases, is some search options. And that's going to control what comes back from the MarkLogic backend when you execute a search. We've set up a couple of constraints, and those are required for setting up faceted search in our UI. We're going to leverage one of those constraints when we do faceted search. And we're also including some of that raw document data in our search results. And since the documents are pretty small, we're just adding each of those documents to the search results when they come back. And we'll be able to leverage that raw document content in our widgets as well. So with that, we can jump in to our React application and start writing some code and see what comes up in the browser. So I'm going to switch to my IDE. And this is just a vanilla basic React application scaffolded with the Vite framework. We have a main.jsx file, and that's kind of just the root of our React application. it's pulling in an app component, and it's our app component that's going to show everything in our browser. So we'll quickly edit the main JSX file and then do the rest of our editing in our app component. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is set up the communication between the UI and the back end. And we're going to do that in our main.jsx file. And we're going to use a helper component that works along with MarkLogic context called MarkLogic provider. So I'm going to copy this text. I'll be switching from my notes file to our other files and just augmenting and iteratively adding as we go along here. So we just updated our main.jsx file. Let me save it. And we've brought in MarkLogic provider from FastTrack, and we're wrapping the app component. And we're wrapping it with the following information. We're saying to our application, our backend exists at localhost. That's the host we're going to be hitting because everything's running locally on my laptop here. The middle tier is exposing its API at port 4001. Okay. If we have search options set up on the server, we can define them here. And as we saw a moment ago, we do have some search options running on MarkLogic. And for this basic demo app, we're also passing through some authentication information. And of course, this would be different in a real world app, and it would be handled differently based on your use case. All right, so let's start adding some widgets to our app now from FastTrack. I'm going to update our app component with some FastTrack widgets. We're bringing in MarkLogic context, we're bringing in search box, and we're bringing in result snippet. Search box is going to provide a way for a user to type in free-form text queries, and result snippet is going to grab any results information that comes back and display it in a real basic way in our UI. And because these widgets understand MarkLogic and the APIs that we're hitting, we're going to be able to get a search app working very quickly with very little configuration because we know what's coming back and how to deal with it. So let's save this and then go to our app in our browser. All right. So we see the text box here, our search box widget. I'm going to type in some text, execute a search. Oh, nothing's coming back. Well, that's expected because we need a little more information here. We actually need to use the context to execute our search and then get some response information back from the back end. So let's do that next. We're going to add some event handlers to make our search actually work in our UI. All right, so what have we done here? We've added an on-search event handler to our search box. So whenever someone now clicks the search button, it's going to execute this function handle search. Handle search is going to take the information from our search box, which is stored in params, and it's going to grab the query text out of it and put it into our context object. And we're going to set the query text property in our context to whatever's coming out of our search box. And then down in our results snippet, we're telling our results snippet, this is where the results are going to come back in MarkLogic's context. And results snippet is going to keep an eye on this property here, and when it changes, it's going to update the UI. So now when we go back to our app, let's just refresh. Execute a search, and now we're getting data back from our backend from MarkLogic. All right, and we're getting all three documents that are in the database here. And in a way, this looks simple, but in another way, it's very powerful because now we can basically write whatever search queries that we know MarkLogic can handle and get data back. We can do a Boolean query, run or walk. That's bringing back information. And notice MarkLogic can take run and actually match it to content that it has running, or walk and match it to content that has walking, because we have stemming turned on in the back end, and it can expand our searches and get more information. So we now have a MarkLogic search application, and let's now take it further. And one thing we can do is, okay, we have some basic information coming back with results snippet. How can we then augment result snippet to, say, access more features that are provided by this widget? I'm going to switch over now to FastTrack Storybook, which is part of our documentation, and it basically allows you to review all the widgets available in our library. So over on the left side, we're listing all the widgets that we can use in our application, and we can see the ones that we're already using. Search box and Storybook give us an example of search box here, and it shows us all the props that we can pass into the widget to control how it behaves and the features it exposes. We can do the same for result snippet. Here's an example. That's kind of what we see in our app right now. And we can scroll down and see all the features and all the props we can use to control what happens in our search results there in result snippet. So let's say, we want to turn on pagination in our result snippet widget. I can do that with this pagination footer prop. I see it accepts a Boolean value. The default is false. I can change it to true to turn on pagination in the footer. And I can also set the size of that pagination with pagination size. And here it's telling me what possible properties I can pass in. So now I can go to my code and I can edit result snippet. Let's add pagination footer, set it to true. Let's add pagination size, set it to small, save. And now when we go back to our app, hey, we have pagination in the footer. And we're not going to get much pagination action here because we only have 3 documents, but we do see a summary here. And it works. Great. Let's keep rolling now, and let's add faceted search to our MarkLogic search application. So now I am going to add a little more code to our app.jsx file to set up faceting. So what have we done here? We've brought in a new widget, string facet. We've added it to our UI down here. And we've configured it to show the status property and to summarize the status property and allow us to apply constraints on our search to the status property. So each of our documents has a status value. It can be active or inactive. And we're pointing our widget to that property here. We're also saying where that property exists in our context search response. We're saying we want to title it status with a capital S. And then, as you'll see, we can click checkboxes to apply facet constraints. And on that text box select, we're going to add an event handler to basically tell MarkLogic context, hey, we just added a string facet constraint. Add it to our application state, and then our widgets that care about that will update and update their display. So I'm going to save that. Let's switch back over to our app, and there it is. Now we have faceted search, not just text-based search. And we can click active just to see all the documents that have status equal to active. Same with inactive. And faceted search, just like that, easy with our string facet widget. Now I could add additional string facets to our app. I could add other type of faceting. I could constrain the document, say by a date and time if they have that information in here. Here's a birth date. We could add a date range facet to constrain by that. We could add numeric constraints that say limit to the person's salary, or bucketed facets that provide a series of ranges that then they could select, similar to the regular string facet. All right, so that's faceted search. Let's move on. And now, as we saw previously, our documents do have latitude and longitude information in them. So let's leverage that and use our GeoMap widget to display a map and markers on that map corresponding to our search results. So I just added to our app.jsx file. We're bringing in GeoMap. We're adding it to our UI here with just some minimal configuration information. We want to center it basically on the United States. We want to set a default zoom of 4. And we want to have a container that's 300 by 560 pixels. But the real core of the functionality for GeoMap is we're passing in, once again, context.search response results, just like we did for our result snippet. And we need to do a little transformation before GeoMap can work. GeoMap's not quite expecting regular search results. It needs those latitude and longitude values formatted in a certain way. And GeoMap is actually leveraging a library from Esri called ArcGIS. So that's a library that's displaying our geospatial map in our UI. So we basically have to transform it so it works the way it's expected for ArcGIS. That's not really too hard to do. Here's our transformation function. And really the core is we're grabbing our latitude out of our search results and putting it here in a point object, doing the same for longitude. And then we're just saying, hey, we want to style our markers in a certain way. It's going to have this orange tomato color. It's going to have a certain size. And we just want a simple marker, which basically gives us a disk on the map. So let's save, switch back, and there it is. We have a map of the United States. We have 3 results, and each of those results is placed where it should be on the map of the United States. So prove it's working. I can search for Ohio. That returns our Ohio result, and there it is. It's a marker on Ohio here. And you'll see that everything's acting in a coordinated fashion because they are all referencing the same MarkLogic context search response. All right. So from here, we're going to add one more widget, and that's our network graph widget. And as we saw previously, we have some relationship information in our documents, and we're going to display those relationships in our UI. So here's our code that adds network graph. We're just augmenting what we did for GeoMap. We're bringing in the network graph widget. And this actually wraps another library similar to GeoMap. It's wrapping a network graphing library called regraph. And a lot of the information we're passing in the network graph will be specific to the regraph innards. And we're, again, going to need to do another transformation step. So we're providing the data that regraph knows how to use and then display. So we're putting in network graph right next to our GeoMap. We're doing minimal configuration here. Again, we're pointing at our search response and the results inside there. We're setting up the container. And basically the key part is our transformation. And that's where we're going to take our search response and convert it to something that Network Graph knows how to use. And this is all documented in our documentation. And you can also get information about how to do this, in Storybook along with our other documentation. So here's the transformation that's occurring. And it's a little bigger than our geomap, but basically it's taking the subject from each relation, the object from each relation, and then the predicate from each relation, and building out our network graph nodes and the connections between them. And actually, a lot of this is just then formatting. We want to put a border around the nodes. We want to color them that tomato color if they're coming directly from our results. If they're just a relationship that aren't in our results, we want to just color them gray to distinguish the two types. And then we want to add arrows to our connecting lines between the nodes. And with that set up, we can go back to our UI, and there we are. And just like that, we have a network graph being displayed in our UI. And again, they're all using the same search results. So when we do a search up here, they're all going to update in a coordinated fashion. Here we see two search results. We see two markers on the map, and we see two orange nodes in our network graph. And our person 1001 has a direct relationship with 1002, so that appears in gray. And again, we can bring faceting into the mix as well. And they all work in a connected, coordinated fashion, thanks to MarkLogic context.